This is Walter White. He's a shy man with low self-esteem. He speaks softly, doesn't make eye contact. His students don't respect him, and his wife doesn't see him as an equal. Walt's son looks up to Hank instead of him. His friends characterize him as a soft man who's not even capable of conflict. They don't speak flatteringly about him directly in his presence.
Dad, come check this out.
Yeah, I see it.
Come on, take it.
Check it out, Walt. No, it's just heavy.
That's why they hire men. Hey, it's not gonna bite you, all right? Looks like Keith Richards with a glass of warm milk.
Which he certainly doesn't like, but he doesn't want to contradict them or defend himself. At the same time, Walter White is a genius, a brilliant chemist who founded the startup Gray Matter worth billions of dollars. All of these factors push him to transform himself. Walt's life is gray and boring, his family lacks money, but despite all the failures of life, Walter White remains a very proud man who follows the rules established by society in every possible way. The psychologist Carl Jung says that the persona is what is in each of us. It is the mask or role we adopt in social life. Persona is the official face of an individual. Persona allows you to do two things at once: favorable impressions on others and hiding the true face of a person. The difficulty is that, like Walt, before his diagnosis, we begin to identify with our persona, risking forgetting our true nature. But Jung also identifies another side of the personality, the personal shadow. This is exactly what begins to be unleashed when Walt discovers his diagnosis. Walter White feels stolen by life and seeks some sort of compensation before he dies. Carl Jung argues that the personal shadow is the force that drives us to make our own rules. It is a force of dominance. It is a thirst to assert its rules and, if possible, to subjugate those around it to those rules. It is for this reason that the personal shadow is, well, probably the main problem and headache for most people, because it is the one that drives a person to all sorts of ventures. We see that's exactly what happened.
Fuck you, Bogdan. What? I said fuck you! And your eyebrows! Wipe down this!
Walt feels pinched and hurt by life and finds pleasure in unleashing his shadows, the Heisenberg. Walt now intends to establish himself in the world, make his presence known, and use his genius by extracting the purest product ever produced on the planet. Unlike the mediocre, humble existence he led before, Heisenberg's life allows him to use his intellect to achieve ambitious goals. Throughout the series, we see the struggle of his shadow and persona. Walter tries to maintain his persona as a respectable family man, while simultaneously enjoying his new role as a powerful criminal genius. Walter embeds his shadow more and more into his persona, and his persona gradually gives way to his true nature. Jung believes that non-acceptance and misunderstanding can have devastating consequences. In Walt's case, that's exactly what's happening. Intoxicated with power and authority, he loses friends, family, and causes suffering for himself and others. As an attentive viewer, you may have noticed that Walt did have a choice. He often tries to appeal to rationality to justify his terrible actions. For example, he could have taken Gretchen and Elliot's money for cancer treatment. He could have accepted Hank and Maria's help. He would have gotten a lot of support from the people around him. His family could have definitely made it through his death, either with or without the help of his entourage. But Walt didn't accept the help of other people. He was tired of being a short, powerless shell of a man who was unable to take care of his family and always lived in the shadows of the people around him. However, a drastic change in Walt's life caused a paradigm shift. The barriers that used to hold him back disappeared. I think you realize when time is running out and longevity is not even worth thinking about, a person often begins to live more directly.
I came to realize it's that fear that's the worst of it. That's the real enemy.
Walt's paradigm shift paved the way for him to redefine himself and accept his life as a cowardly, short man who masquerades as humble and moral. However, Walt's decency was not so decent, for it was a simple weakness. In reality, he was resentful of all those who had better lives, especially Gretchen and Elliot. But he felt powerless and unable to change the circumstances of his life. He was a genius who was content with a gray life. It was an obedient sheep, submitting to what the world imposed upon it. Nietzsche said, "There is no more repulsive and abandoned creature in the world than the man who has given up his genius and who now looks fearfully left and right, behind himself and around him. He is an empty, coreless, tattered, painted sack of clothes deep inside." Such people Nietzsche called the last man. The last man is not preoccupied with immediate pleasures and works for their fulfillment. The last man is tired of life, rejects risk, and seeks only comfort and security. Walter White was the perfect example of the last man. He was tired of life, risk-averse, and unable to realize his full potential. His life revolved around making money to support himself and his family by doing boring chores. That being said, from a moral standpoint, this is in many ways a great man. He's humble, he works hard, he loves his family, he plays by the rules, obediently doing what is good, not what he wants to do. And ironically, his terminal illness was his first unintentional break with the last man type. Had Walter not been diagnosed, he would likely have continued to lead the same life of working for a small paycheck, having small pleasures during the day and equally small pleasures at night. But then this happened.
I am awake.
What?
Or as Nietzsche would say, Walt became Overman. In his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche laid out his idea of the ultimate human condition. Zarathustra is a prophet who, after a period of seclusion, decides to share his wisdom with the world. Nietzsche argued that people do not live by bread alone. We need meaning in our lives. How can humans survive and thrive without an overarching purpose? Trying to save people from soul-destroying nihilism, he proposed the idea of the Overman, which is embodied in history. And Zarathustra is Overman. It is the very vision of what man could be. What depends on the individual is the realization of the ultimate, fully realized potential to which one must aspire. The Overman rejects collective morality, such as that represented by society or religion, and creates his own morality, as Walt does. Nietzsche describes man as a tightrope stretched over the chasm between the beast and the Overman, and trying to cross that chasm is an insanely dangerous but satisfying endeavor. And to get away from being a mere animal, man must strive to transcend his human nature and become Overman. All creatures so far have created something above themselves. Do you want to be the tide of this wave and would rather return to the state of the beast than to surpass man? What is an ape in relation to man? A mockery and a painful disgrace.
Jesse, you asked me if I was in the meth business or the money business. Neither. I'm in the empire business.
And by the same token, man must be to the Overman a laughing stock or an agonizing disgrace. Nietzsche had an aversion to what he called slave morality, which he viewed as human weakness turned into virtues. Therefore, his Overman had no morality. But this is not the same as being immoral. Amorality, in this context, means abandoning traditional values and creating one's own. The evidence that Walter White is moving toward the ideal of the Overman is his rejection of the old collective morality and the adoption of a new one or the creation of his own. This moral transformation is evident of the independent thinking and self-mastery that underlies his rise to power. Walter White sowed death and destruction from the perspective of traditional morality. He became bad by turning evil. And unsurprisingly, he became one of the most wanted criminals. However, his transformation into Heisenberg bore psychological and physical fruit. He felt better, happier, his libido returned, and his cancer went into remission. And at the end of the story, when Skyler asks Walt why he did what he did, instead of repeating his usual excuse that he did it for his family, Walter finally voices his true intention.
I did it for me.